Former President Donald Trump, in a post on Truth Social, characterized last night's dramatic events in the Strait of Hormuz as a nice little love tap. But what exactly did that love tap entail, and what does it reveal about the shifting balance of power in one of the world's most critical waterways? Yesterday morning, an Iranian drone climbed toward an American warship over the Strait of Hormuz. It never reached its target. Instead, an invisible beam, 60 kilowatts of focused, directed energy, locked onto the drone's airframe at the speed of light. This was not from a missile battery, nor a close-in weapon system cycling through its rotary magazine at 4,500 rounds per minute. This was from a laser. The drone's guidance sensor absorbed the beam, cooked instantly, and lost all orientation. Its airframe structure failed. The drone plummeted into the Gulf of Oman as inert debris, a falling object rather than a weapon, having produced exactly zero operational effect against the destroyer it was targeting. The cost of this engagement to the United States Navy? Approximately the electricity required to pull the trigger. This is not the future of naval warfare. This is May 7th, 2026. It is happening right now in the operational theater, where Iran has been attempting to demonstrate that its coastal defense architecture makes the Strait of Hormuz too expensive for American naval power to contest. This near-zero cost of engagement fundamentally alters the long-standing strategic calculus of asymmetric warfare, where smaller powers typically seek to overwhelm technologically superior adversaries through sheer volume and affordability. Historically, even basic intercepts carried significant financial burdens, but this development neutralizes that economic advantage entirely. This unfolding situation occurred as F-35s were simultaneously wheels up from multiple basing locations, carrying precision munitions toward 4 critical geographic nodes. These nodes represent the operational brain, the forward staging platform, the dispatch coordination hub, and the eastern control point of the IRGC. Was entire Hormuz maritime interdiction strategy. Within the hour after that drone fell into the Gulf of Oman, the very ports that launched the attack were ablaze: Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, Minab, and Bandar Kamir. Missile batteries were silenced, radar arrays went dark, and command posts were obliterated. The coastal defense architecture that Iran spent years and billions of dollars constructing, designed to make American admirals lose sleep over the Strait of Hormuz, was systematically deconstructed in a single night of precision strikes. And threading through the middle of all of it, absorbing simultaneous attacks from fast attack boats, drone swarms, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, 3 American guided missile destroyers took 0 hits. The USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason completed one of the most contested naval transits in the modern era, sailing clean into the Gulf of Oman. 3 ships, 0 hits. Every Iranian weapon that reached the engagement zone was either intercepted, destroyed, or neutralized before it produced any effect on any American vessel. Iran's state media immediately called the events a ceasefire violation, claiming their air defenses shot down 2 American aircraft. That claim has not been independently verified by any source with actual access to the operational picture. Meanwhile, CENTCOM's statement was specific, documented, and delivered with the institutional confidence of a command that knows exactly what happened and wants the record to reflect it precisely. U.S. forces intercepted unprovoked Iranian attacks and responded with precision self-defense strikes as U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf of Oman. Former President Trump's Truth Social post framed it with a specific rhetorical construction carrying both diplomatic and military meaning simultaneously. No damage to the 3 destroyers. Great damage to the Iranian attackers. He then characterized the retaliatory port strikes in a way that deserves analysis beyond its surface reading. A nice little love tap. Iran should be very motivated to get a deal signed before they find out what that other hand feels like, because that one is not going to be a love tap. Here, diplomacy and military operation run in the same sentence. The ceasefire is technically still standing. The table is technically still available. But the message is specific and calibrated. What Iran experienced last night was the restrained version, a demonstration of capability without maximizing destruction. It struck operational infrastructure rather than population centers, or the full depth of the target list contained in CENTCOM's options brief. Love tap is not a dismissal of what happened. It is a specific warning, positioning these events as a preview rather than a climax. To understand why May 7th's full operational picture is as significant as it is, you must start with the geography. Because geography is where Iran's entire military doctrine is grounded. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, 21 miles of water through which 20% of the world's oil moves every day. For decades, Iran's strategic calculation has been built around one foundational assessment. The physical dimensions of the strait create a natural choke point whose geographic constraints make it operationally controllable by a coastal power with sufficient missiles, drones, fast attack boats, mines, and command infrastructure positioned along the northern shore. If Iran can position enough weapons along enough of that northern shore, the passage can be made expensive enough that no adversary can guarantee safe transit without absorbing costs that eventually become politically intolerable. This is not theoretical. Iran built the architecture to execute this doctrine: missiles and hardened coastal batteries, radar arrays providing targeting data for those batteries, command and control infrastructure coordinating the operational picture across the strait, fast attack boat squadrons positioned in sheltered coves and island staging areas, and drone launch capabilities that can send swarms from the coastline into the engagement zone faster than a ship can transit the narrowest sections. May 7th was Iran's most serious attempt to demonstrate that this doctrine still works against the American force posture that has been operating against it since the conflict began. Simultaneous fast attack craft closing from multiple vectors, drone swarms inbound from the northern coastline, ballistic and cruise missiles fired from shore-based launch sites. This coordinated saturation attack is exactly the engagement scenario Iran's doctrine is designed to produce. A scenario where defending ships must simultaneously track and engage dozens of independent threats arriving from different vectors, at different speeds, at different altitudes, while maintaining their own transit and avoiding mines. The EEGI's combat system is the specific technical reason this scenario did not produce the outcome Iran's doctrine predicts. The integrated radar and weapons management system aboard each Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is not a point defense system designed to engage one threat at a time. It is a networked combat architecture that can simultaneously track over 100 targets, prioritize them by threat assessment, compute intercept solutions, and execute those solutions across multiple weapon categories simultaneously. Every incoming missile was intercepted. The SM-6 and SM-2 interceptors assigned to the ballistic and cruise missile threat. The close-in weapons engaging the shorter-range threats that survive the outer layers. The Phalanx CIWS is the final layer against anything that penetrated everything else. Nothing penetrated everything else. The fast attack boats encountered the Apache helicopters. The AH-64 Apache's role in May 7th's engagement represents the specific tactical evolution that the IRGC's fast attack boat doctrine was not designed to survive. The Apache's Hellfire missiles engage fast attack boats at ranges where the boat's own weapons cannot reach the helicopter. The M230 chain gun shreds unarmored fiberglass hulls at a rate that makes a 1-second engagement effective. The boats behind the first wave watched their lead elements get destroyed before they could reach the destroyers. Some scattered, some did not scatter fast enough. The ones that did not scatter fast enough went to the bottom of the strait alongside the ones the Apaches had already engaged. The drone swarms ran into the directed energy systems. This is the specific technological development that changes the strategic calculus of this conflict more permanently than any single kinetic event could. Because the drone swarm is Iran's answer to the cost asymmetry problem. A Shahed drone costs approximately $20,000 to $30,000. A traditional interceptor missile costs millions. If you can fire enough drones in enough waves to exhaust a ship's interceptor inventory, you eventually create the window where drones get through against a vessel that has nothing left to shoot them with. This was the operational theory. This was the strategic logic that made the drone swarm a genuine threat to extended naval operations. Directed energy removes the cost asymmetry from the equation entirely. This shift from kinetic to directed energy defense represents a paradigm change, effectively nullifying the economic leverage that asymmetric adversaries have historically sought to exploit. Unlike the finite and costly missile inventories of the past, the near-limitless capacity of directed energy systems fundamentally redefines the viability of saturation attacks. 2 directed energy systems are confirmed deployed in this theater. Either or both were active during May 7th's engagement. The OH-DIN system, Optical Dazzling Interdictor, designation SEQ-4, is the soft kill system. It projects a focused laser beam onto a drone's electro-optical and infrared sensors. The drone does not explode, it goes blind. Its guidance system loses the target, loses orientation. The airframe either crashes on its own or becomes easy prey for other defensive systems because it is flying blind and unpredictably. OH-DIN has been confirmed deployed on A.R. Lee Burt-class destroyers during this operation. It is not experimental, it is not developmental. It is operationally deployed and performing the specific function it was designed to perform against the specific threat category that Iran has been deploying throughout this conflict. The HEE-Lee-OHS system makes OH-DIN look restrained. High-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance, MK-5 Mod 0, deployed aboard the USS Preble. 60 kilowatts of focused energy directed at an airframe. Not blindness, but structural destruction. The beam burns through the drone's physical structure in midair, invisibly, at the speed of light. In early 2026, the USS Preble used the Helio system to destroy 4 drones in a live at-sea demonstration under actual ocean conditions with real sea state and salt air environmental factors. Proof of concept under operational conditions. The Chief of Naval Operations was explicit about what this represents. Directed energy becomes the first choice close-in defense for every ship in the fleet. The phrase containing the most strategic weight in that statement is infinite magazine. An interceptor missile has a finite inventory. Load it, fire it, expend it, require resupply. Extended naval operations in a contested environment that requires continuous interceptor employment create the specific logistics vulnerability that Iran's drone swarm doctrine was designed to exploit. Fill the sky with enough drones for enough sustained periods, and eventually the interceptor magazine runs low, runs empty, creating the window. The directed energy weapon has no magazine to deplete in the conventional sense. As long as the ship has power, the laser has power. As long as the laser has power, it can fire. The cost per engagement is electricity. The resupply requirement is fuel for the ship's generators. Iran's drone swarm strategy just lost its economic logic against vessels equipped with this technology. This is not a marginal operational improvement. It is a fundamental change in the strategic architecture of the drone threat. The entire cost asymmetry argument, the entire resource depletion theory of drone warfare against naval assets, rests on the assumption that intercepting each drone costs orders of magnitude more than producing each drone. That assumption is now false against ships with Helios or Odin deployed. The drone costs $20,000 to produce. The laser costs electricity to fire. Firing thousands of drones at a ship with directed energy defense is not a cost-effective strategy. It is expensive target practice for the ship's energy systems. The counterstrikes hit 4 geographic nodes with the specific selection logic of a target list that was not assembled reactively. This was not retaliatory bombing in the sense of hitting whatever was accessible in the aftermath of an attack. This was the execution of a pre-planned deconstruction of the specific infrastructure that just failed to stop 3 American destroyers. Bandar Abbas is the crown jewel of Iran's Hormuz power projection, simultaneously Iran's largest commercial port and the headquarters of the IRGC, Navy's surface and submarine operations in the Persian Gulf. The naval base adjacent to the commercial port houses fast attack craft, mine-laying vessels, and the command infrastructure that coordinates interdiction operations across the strait. Striking Bandar Abbas produces compound damage, the military capability of the IRGC. Navy surface operations is degraded. The commercial port infrastructure that provides the economic function of the city is disrupted, and the command and control architecture that coordinates the maritime harassment operations loses its primary hub. You cannot replace Bandar Abbas with an alternative location. It is the product of decades of investment, infrastructure development, and geographic positioning. What the strike packages hit last night cannot be rebuilt in weeks or months. The IRGC Navy, which was coordinating its Mosquito fleet from the Bandar Abbas command infrastructure, does not have a backup headquarters ready to assume those functions at the same capacity. Qeshm Island is Iran's self-described unsinkable aircraft carrier, the largest island in the Persian Gulf at 1,500 square kilometers, positioned directly inside the strait to control the northern shipping lane through the Hormuz Passage. Iranian forces have used Qeshm to stage drone operations, position the coastal radar arrays that provide targeting data for anti-ship missile batteries, and station fast attack boat squadrons in the island's sheltered coves. The Bandar Pier on Qeshm's southern coast was specifically named in Iranian state media reports of the strike. It is a confirmed IRGC logistics node. The specific function it serves is the resupply of IRGC naval assets operating in the forward strait engagement zone. A mine-laying vessel operating in the northern shipping lane needs fuel, ordnance, maintenance support, and crew relief. The Bandar Pier coordinates these logistics. With the Bandar Pier struck, the IRGC, its ability to sustain forward operations from its forward island staging platform has been degraded at the specific logistics choke point that makes sustained operations possible. The unsinkable aircraft carrier has had its flight deck logistics system knocked out. Minab sits inland from the coast, southeast of Bandar Abbas. Its significance is specific. The IRGC Naval Police checkpoint at Minab is the confirmed target of last night's strike. This facility coordinates the small boat swarms. It is the operational dispatch center for the Mosquito Fleet strategy, the organizational brain that assigns mission parameters, timing sequences, and approach vectors to the fast attack boat groups that execute the multi-vector swarm attacks that Iran's doctrine relies on. When you take out the Bandar Abbas command headquarters, and you also take out the Minab Dispatch Coordination Center, you have not simply reduced Iran's fast attack boat count. You have removed two of the three essential functions that make coordinated, fast attack boat operations possible: command authority and logistics support. The third function, the boats themselves, are now without the infrastructure that enables them to be employed with the coordinated, multi-vector approach that makes them a genuine tactical challenge, rather than a collection of individual boats whose independent actions are much less threatening than their coordinated employment. Bandar Kamir is the Eastern Strait Control Point, a smaller coastal checkpoint used as a naval control node for vessels entering and exiting the eastern approach to the strait. Combined with Minab, its elimination tightens the American grip on Iran's ability to surge any maritime assets into the strait's engagement zone from the eastern approach direction that Western-focused operational planning might not adequately monitor. The four targets together are not random. They are the four operational nodes that form the complete functional architecture of Iran's Hormuz harassment capability: command, logistics, coordination, and access control. Strike all four in a single night, and the architecture does not have degraded capability. It has missing pillars. The structure does not lean. It collapses. The KC-35 Stratotanker tracks are the operational signature that tells the full story of the strike package's scale and duration. 5 aerial refueling jets were airborne from the UAE simultaneously, maintaining their orbital patterns over UAE airspace throughout the strike operation. You do not keep 5 tankers airborne simultaneously for a single pass strike package. A single wave attack sends the aircraft in, they expend their ordnance, they return to base. No sustained tanker orbit required. 5 tankers sustained simultaneously means multiple waves, multiple aircraft, extended time over target. The kind of sustained, multi-wave campaign that systematically addresses every element of the target list, rather than hitting the highest priority targets and departing before secondary targets can be addressed. 5 tankers means something flew a lot of miles last night, and it was not heading away from Iran. The F-35 is the most operationally appropriate platform for this strike mission, and the target profile points clearly toward its involvement across multiple variants. The Navy's F-35C, operating from the USS Abraham Lincoln, the Air Force's F-35A, operating from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, approximately 15 flight minutes from the Hormuz coastline, and the Marine Expeditionary Unit's F-35B, the short takeoff and vertical landing variant that can operate from the amphibious assault ships positioned in the operational theater. 3 types of F-35s likely participated in last night's strikes, each bringing the same core capability in a different basing configuration that adds operational flexibility to the strike planning. The APG-81 AESA radar that all 3 variants carry is the specific sensor capability that makes the F-35 so effective against the coastal defense target set that last night's strikes addressed. The active electronically scanned array simultaneously tracks and guides weapons while passively jamming enemy radars without broadcasting the aircraft's own radar emissions in a way that Iranian air defense systems can use for targeting against Iranian coastal air defense systems that Operation Epic Flowery has been systematically degrading for weeks. The F-35's combination of low observable stealth profile and AESA electronic warfare creates an approach geometry that Iranian surviving radar systems cannot reliably detect or track. A ghost on approach, that is the operational description. And against radar systems that have already been degraded, suppressed, and in some cases physically destroyed, the ghost metaphor is operationally accurate. The AH 64 Apaches that contributed to the fast attack boat destruction during the destroyer transit are the same platform whose operational record in this conflict has established the specific deterrence message that the IRGC's fast boat commanders now need to process. The Apache at low altitude over confined water is the specific engagement configuration that the IRGC's fast attack boat doctrine has no effective counter to. The boat can close at high speed. The Apache is faster, higher, armed with hellfires that engage at ranges beyond the boat's own weapons, and operates with the sensor fusion that makes target acquisition in the cluttered littoral environment of the strait manageable. The specific tactical sequence that the May 7th engagement produced deserves examination, because it reveals the operating limits of the IRGC. Is multi-vector saturation strategy when that strategy encounters a well-integrated defensive response. The fast attack craft approaching from multiple vectors to confuse the EEGI system's threat prioritization are the first wave. But the EEGIS does not get confused by multiple vectors. It tracks all of them simultaneously and assigns intercept solutions in the priority order that the engagement geometry and estimated threat severity determine. The fast attack boats add to the radar picture's complexity, but not beyond the system's management capacity. They are tracked, they are assigned, and the Apaches and the ship's own close-in weapons engage them in the sequence that the EEGs determines optimizes the overall defensive outcome. The drone swarms launched from the northern coastline are the second wave, intended to occupy the defensive systems engaging the fast attack boats and create the saturation condition where something inevitably gets through. They ran into the directed energy systems. The ones in front were destroyed structurally by 60 kilowatts of focused beam. The ones behind them watched the ones in front fall from the sky as inert debris. Some of the trailing drones scattered. Some did not scatter in time. The ballistic and cruise missiles from the shore-based launch sites represent the third threat vector, the high-altitude, high-speed threat designed to be simultaneously in the engagement space with the low and slow threats to create multi-domain saturation. The EEJs, SM-6 and SM-2 interceptors engage these in the specific outer layer geometry where the intercept probability is highest and the alternative consequences of a miss are most severe. 3 threat categories, 3 defensive layers, 3 destroyers that took 0 hits. Iran's strategic communication in the aftermath of May 7th follows the predictable pattern that every IRGC loss in this conflict has generated. State media claiming downed American aircraft, promises of reciprocal action, assertions that the ceasefire has been violated by the American side. None of these claims are independently verifiable because the Iranian information environment does not permit independent verification by any media organization that would report findings the regime finds unfavorable. The specific claim of downed American aircraft is an information operation product that serves the domestic audience. For an Iranian population that has been sealed off from external information for 63 days, the claim that air defenses shot down American aircraft provides the psychological sustenance the regime needs to maintain the narrative of continued resistance. The operational reality of 3 destroyers with 0 hits and 4 IRGC port facilities in flames is not the narrative that serves this purpose. The UAE, as establishment of a formal national committee to document Iranian acts of aggression and their damages, is a diplomatic development that deserves equal weight alongside the military events of May 7th. The UAE is building a legal and diplomatic case. It is creating the formal evidentiary record that international legal frameworks require before claims can be advanced. A country that is building a documentation committee is a country that is preparing to pursue consequences for what Iran has been doing to it through channels that extend beyond the immediate military exchange. The UAE's air defenses also activated on May 7th to intercept Iranian threats directed at Gulf partner territory. The coalition that Iran's strategy has always depended on fracturing, the Gulf partner alignment with American operations, is not fracturing. It is calcifying. Every Iranian attack on Gulf partner territory adds another layer of justification for the Gulf partners' alignment with the American position and removes another layer of the diplomatic space that Iranian strategy requires to exist if it is going to produce the European and regional pressure for American accommodation that the IRGC is counting on. Iran's grand strategy for the Strait of Hormuz was built around 2 pillars. The first pillar is the global energy market's fear of full Hormuz closure. If the global economic cost of a closed strait is high enough, international pressure on Washington to find an accommodation that preserves Iranian leverage becomes overwhelming. Energy prices spike, supply chains disrupt. Governments that have nothing to do with the Iranian-American conflict find their economies affected by it and demand resolution on terms that allow the disruption to end. Iran's ability to credibly threaten this outcome is the source of its negotiating leverage. Yet, Brent crude has actually declined in recent trading sessions, not spiked, but declined. The market's response to May 7th's military engagement is not the panic pricing that Iranian doctrine predicts. It is the orderly adjustment of a market that has been watching the American force posture perform exactly as it was designed to perform, and has concluded that the strait is more likely to open than to close. The Fujairah pipeline bypass that the UAE activated at full capacity and the Saudi Petro line moving 5 to 7 million barrels per day to the Red Sea independently of Hormuz represent the alternative routing architecture that has been building throughout this conflict. This is providing exactly the supply security the market needs to avoid the acute panic pricing that Iran's leverage theory depends on. The second pillar is sustained harassment, exhausting American political will to maintain the blockade indefinitely. This pillar required the drone swarm strategy to remain economically viable, meaning that each drone attack had to impose costs on the American side that exceeded the cost of the drone. That equation required traditional interceptor missiles as the American response. Interceptor missiles at millions of dollars per shot against drones at tens of thousands of dollars per unit makes the attrition math favor the attacker over extended operations. Directed energy broke this second pillar. 60 kilowatts at the cost of electricity per engagement. Infinite magazine. No resupply requirement. The sustained harassment strategy that was supposed to exhaust American interceptor inventories and eventually create the political pressure for accommodation is now a strategy of launching expensive drones at ships that shoot them down with laser beams that cost essentially nothing to fire. The economic logic of the drone swarm attrition strategy has been dissolved by a single technology deployment. The complete dissolution of Iran's economic logic for drone swarms marks a profound strategic defeat, as it removes the very foundation of their asymmetric warfare approach. This technological leap means that a core tenet of their military doctrine, designed to exploit cost disparities, is now rendered obsolete, forcing a complete reevaluation of their operational playbook. Iran's military response options have been reduced to specific categories that remain after directed energy neutralizes the drone swarm, after the EEJIs neutralizes the missile salvo, after the Apaches neutralize the fast attack boats, and after the precision strikes address the command infrastructure. These include coastal battery missiles that survive because they are hardened or underground, the ballistic missile inventory that the CIA assessment pegged at 70% of pre-war stockpiles, but whose mobile launcher retention means they require different targeting than fixed infrastructure, and the SHA heads that are stockpiled in civilian-adjacent facilities, hidden by the organized crime doctrine, against the force posture arrayed against these capabilities. The operational picture is that of an institution stripped of the specific tools that made its doctrine credible, left with residual capabilities whose effectiveness has been systematically demonstrated as insufficient by every engagement since the conflict began. The love tap framing in Trump's Truth Social post is the diplomatic dimension of May 7th, operating in parallel with the military dimension. European partners who have been pressing Washington to hold the ceasefire and allow the diplomatic framework to reach its conclusion are receiving the message that the American response was proportionate, restrained, and specifically calibrated to the direct threat that the Iranian attack on the 3 destroyers represented. The strikes were self-defense. The targeting was precise. The damage was military and operational, rather than civilian or economic in the collateral sense that would generate the international condemnation that Iran's information strategy was designed to produce. The love tap framing simultaneously warns Iran that the restraint is a choice rather than a capability limitation. The other hand, the one that is not a love tap, represents the full depth of the target list that the CENTCOM options brief contains: the industrial infrastructure, the remaining nuclear program elements, the command centers, specific targets whose engagement would constitute the bombing at a much higher level and intensity that Trump has been describing since the ceasefire began. Those targets are on the list. The 3 destroyers transiting the strait under fire and taking 0 hits is the demonstration that the force capable of executing the full target list is operating at high effectiveness and could expand its operational scope without difficulty. Iran's decision-making apparatus is processing these signals in real time from the same deep bunkers where senior IRGC commanders have been operating since the Zanjan explosion demonstrated that insider intelligence is compromising their security architecture. The nihilistic faction that has been driving the military escalation, the hardliners who announced that agreement is far removed from reality, and who directed the coordinated attack on the 3 American destroyers, has now watched that attack produce 0 hits against its targets and 4 of its own key facilities in flames. The question that the nihilistic faction's decision-making structure is answering is whether the lesson of May 7th is deterrence or escalation. The deterrence reading says the saturation attack produced nothing, and the counterstrike destroyed important infrastructure. The next escalation produces worse results against a better prepared American defensive architecture and more infrastructure losses on the Iranian side. Signing the deal is better than this. The escalation reading says the saturation attack demonstrated that the capacity still exists, even if it did not produce hits this time. Continued harassment maintains the pressure that eventually produces accommodation. The deal terms are still unacceptable, and the IRGC's institutional survival requires refusing them. Which reading the hardline faction adopts determines what happens in the next 72 hours. The directed energy weapons favor the deterrence reading, the infinite magazine, the zero-cost engagement, the structural impossibility of the drone swarm attrition strategy against ships equipped with this technology. All point toward a military reality in which continued escalation is not strategically viable for the IRGC. However, the nihilistic faction's track record in this conflict does not favor the deterrence reading. This is the faction that declared agreement far removed from reality while the framework negotiations were in progress. The faction that fired anti-ship missiles at American destroyers during a ceasefire.